We're now in section J, understanding terms is on page 12. So for example, over here, let's say we have 5 tables and 2 chairs. 5 tables and 2 chairs would represent 2 different terms. One term would be 5 tables, and the second term would be 2 chairs. So just for an example, we have 5 tables and 2 chairs. That would represent 2 different terms. The one term being the number of tables, that's 5 tables, and the second term being the number of chairs, that's 2 chairs. So that's 2 different terms right here. 5 tables and 2 chairs. Those are 2 terms. Let's say we have 2 phones, 4 shoes, and 20 kippas. That's 3 different terms. You have 2 phones, that's considered one term. 4 shoes is considered a second term, and 20 kippas is considered the third term. Those are 3 different terms. Now the numbers in front of the numbers of the terms are called the coefficients. That tells you how many for each term. So let's say we're talking about the first term is the number of phones. The number 2 is the coefficient. So 2 phones is the first term. And the number 2 is called your coefficient. 4 would be a coefficient and 20 would be a coefficient. That's just to get the idea of what a term. In algebra, a term is either a single number or variable, or numbers and variables multiplied together. So in algebra, a term is either a single number or a variable. A variable again is a letter, or numbers and variables multiplied together. So for instance, we have a bunch of different terms because either it's a number or a variable, or numbers and variables multiplied together. So for instance, we have 7x. That's 7 times x. That would be a term, right? So over here, let's say we have 5x. That would be a term, right? Because it's a number and variable multiplied together. Z would be or a variable, would just be a variable. So therefore, it's a term. The number 24, it's either a single number or just a variable, or numbers and variables multiplied together. 5x is 5 times x. That's a number and a variable multiplied together. So that also be considered a single term. 7x is considered one term because it's a number and a variable multiplied together. So you have 7x. The number in front, the number in the term is called the coefficient. In this case, it's 7x. You have 14ab. Again, you have numbers and variables multiplied together, so therefore it's considered a term. The number in front is called the coefficient, and that is 14. So the number in front of the term is called your coefficient, and that is 14 in our case. Negative 21 x squared t. Again, the number is always written first in the term. You have negative 21 x squared t. Again, you have numbers and variables multiplied together, so therefore it's considered a single term. The number in front is negative 21, so therefore that is your coefficient, which is negative 21. Negative 8, there is no other variable, it's just a single number. When you just have a single number, the negative 8 is not called a coefficient, it's actually called a constant. So if we just have a number, again, negative 8, since it's a single number, is considered a term as well. However, if you just have a number with no variable next to it, it's considered a constant. We'll get more about that later, but that's called a constant. D is a variable. A term could either be a single number or a single variable, a letter, or numbers and variables multiplied together. In this case, you have a D. D would be a term. Every term has a coefficient. Every single term has a coefficient. That means a number in front. So even though right now it just says D, there really is a number in front, and that number is 1. So if there's no coefficient, if there's no number for that term, you just write 1, and that would be the coefficient. Let's say you have negative x. Again, there's no number for the coefficient, but that number is really negative 1. The reason why that is let's say I have a pencil. Really, I have one pencil. I didn't say I have one pencil. I said I have a pencil, which is the same thing as one pencil. If I say I have a x, that means I really have one x. A squared h, again, there's no coefficient, so you'd write the number 1, and that would be the coefficient. A squared h is a times h. Again, that's numbers and variables multiplied together. It could also be variables and variables multiplied together, and the number in front would be the number 1. This would be 1a squared h. Negative x squared y squared h is also considered a single term, again, because these are numbers and variables. The number is negative 1. That's the coefficient. If there's no number in front written, the number is 1. If it just says negative, that means it's negative 1. Say we have numbers and variables multiplied together, and therefore it's called a term. So this, even though it's a long thing, is still considered a term because these are numbers and variables multiplied together. Now over here we have 4x plus 2. So how many terms do we have? The answer would be there are 2 terms. We have one term is the 4x, right? Because that's a number and a variable multiplied together. So that's 4x. That's one term. And the second term is a positive 2. Those are your 2 terms. Over here, we have three terms. We have 3x squared, which is number 1. We have the second term is negative 1y, and the third term is a positive 4. This is a negative 1y. The coefficient here is 3, the coefficient here is negative 1, and this is called a constant. It's considered a term, but it's called a constant. Here we have four terms. We have the 2x cubed, 2xy cubed, that's one term. Negative 4z, that's the second term. Again, it's numbers and variables multiplied together. So this is considered one term. This is considered a second term, negative 4z. This is considered a third term, a positive 1/4 x. And this is considered a fourth term, negative 5. Those are considered the four terms. So now we're going to do these questions. We have state the number of terms in each expression, then circle each term and write the coefficient on top. So we're going to state the number of terms in each expression, circle each term, and then write the coefficient of each term on top. So first we have number 1. Number 1 has 4 terms. So that's 4. So you're going to circle them. So that's 1 is like this. This is the second term. Basically, the sign is either negative or positive. And that sign will denote a new term. So if you have the sign right here, is negative 4ay. I know it's in between two numbers, but we call it, part of this term is called negative 4ay. This is the third term, a positive 1/3 xm. And this is the fourth term, a negative g. That is 4 terms altogether. Now you're going to write the coefficient on top of each term. So the coefficient in front of the first term is a 5, right? Because that's the number in front of the first term. The second term, the coefficient is a number in front of that term, which is a negative 4. So negative 4 is your coefficient for the second one. The third one has a number in front, which is a positive 1/3. So that's your third coefficient. And the last coefficient is negative 1 because it says negative g. So therefore, it's negative 1. And that is the answer for number 1. Number 2, this is negative a3 x5 yza. This is considered one term. You circle it. You see there is basically the signs separate between terms. So this would be, you see positive 1/3 x, but there's only negative. That means it's only one term altogether. You write the number 1. The coefficient in front is negative 1. There's no number in front, therefore it's 1. And it says negative, therefore it's negative 1. Number 3, we have negative ab squared. That's one term. The second term is negative 4/5 tx. Again, the sign is part of that term over here. The sign is part of this because this is the negative 4/5 tx, a positive 1.5y, and a negative 10. That is 4 terms altogether. The coefficient of the first term, it says negative, therefore the coefficient is negative 1. The coefficient of the second term is negative 4/5. The coefficient of the third term is a positive 1.5, and the coefficient of the fourth term is negative 10. It's not really a coefficient, it's called a constant, but you can write negative 10 on top. Number 4, we're going to circle 6x to the 6, a positive 3x squared, a negative 1.3y squared, a positive 3y, and a positive 11. That's 5 terms altogether. The coefficient of the first term is a 6. Coefficient of the second term is a 3. The coefficient of the third term is negative 1.3. The fourth term is a positive 3. And the fifth one, which is a constant because it doesn't have a variable with it, is 11. Number 5 is 1, negative ax5, negative 2y to the third, and a positive az. That's 3 terms altogether. The coefficient of the first term is a negative 1. The coefficient of the second term is negative 2. And the coefficient of the third term is a positive 1. And that is the answers from 1 through 5. Again, every term has a coefficient. That means the number in front of that term. And that number has a sign, either negative or positive, and that is part of that term. And that is the answers to section J.